So one thing I want to tell you about too, you see this spot crime? Spot crime? It's one of the apps that's, bless you, that's available, okay? And there's several apps that you might want to put on your phone. We all know about Amber Alerts, right? There's also weather alerts. If you go to the county emergency management page and look on there, they've got some applications that they talk about that you might want to download. And here's why. You put some of these, you put your zip code in. For example, with spot crime, if you put your zip code in, and you can say, I want to know with crimes within 5 miles, 10 miles, 15, 20, 30, whatever that is. And I don't care about jaywalking, but I want to know about burglaries and blah, 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 blah. You can customize that app so that if X, Y, and Z happens in your neighborhood, A, you know about it, and B, if you're not home, you can decide, well, I'm not going home now. I'll wait till that gets resolved before I go. Okay, so spot crime, it's got all kinds of good, yeah, you guys live in a good neighborhood, don't you? Okay, so if you look, this is where we are, right? And the blue man walking around, that's just theft. You don't see any homicides, you don't see, those kinds of things. Okay, that's probably because most people have their doors secured. Got a German Shepherd? All right. So when it comes to risk, there's a couple things we can do about it. We can transfer risk. Typically, that means we buy insurance. So that means somebody else is going to pay for repairs. There's lots of things that you can't transfer the risk. Most of the time, we just accept the risk. We just shrug our shoulders and go on. Avoid the risk, we move. But where are we going to move to? There is no safe place. As long as there's humanity, there is no perfect place. Doesn't matter. So what we can do is try to live in a good place and make a good place better. All right? And then mitigating the risk. So how do we mitigate risk? We reduce the risk by being prepared, okay? By having the things that we need. Something bad happens, it's just, okay, it's just something that happens versus it being a catastrophe for me and my family. So for example, the power goes out for 3 days, okay? All right, I have an alternate means of power, so I can at least charge my computer. I can charge my cell phone. We have different flashlights. So, I have a flashlight on my end stand. April's got one on hers. I got one next to the front door, one in the kids' room, 3 of them in the car, one under each seat, one in the glove box, because you never know when the lights go out. So, all right. So, and this is really the core of this presentation tonight. Okay, so something bad happens, whatever that is. Doesn't matter if it's an earthquake or a meteor strike or whatever it is, okay? But let's just say that enough people are affected that the governor declares a disaster, like the flooding in Arkansas and Missouri right now. Okay, so all the safety triggers are exceeded. And what I mean by that is, that means that, so for example, if you live in Missouri and the Ruby-Doo, which I used to kayak every day, is this deep, yes, it's time to go. Okay, it is time to go because when it gets this deep, you can't get out. Okay, so we'll talk again about what are the typical risks for this area. Okay, so you should determine what those evacuation criteria or action criteria might be or triggers. So if I'm ready for that, it's not a disaster for me and my family, right? When the water's this deep, we leave the house. So I know what to do. The wife, April's we have a bug out kit in her trunk. I got a bug out kit in my trunk, and so we have all the essentials that we need. We get on the phone, and if I can't get on the phone because all the frequencies are either jammed or, from the law enforcement or other people or whatever, we have an alternate means of communication. And if you are worried about EMP, we have a Faraday bag to keep out the nasty electrons. Okay, so we have an alternate means of communication. So I say, hey, we have a plan too that says in the event of X, go, she knows what to do. So we have a couple of code words too. So if I say orange tree, we're going to my mother-in-law's in Salt Lake. If I say, because that's real brief, instead of getting on the phone and going, yeah, we got blah, 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 blah going on here, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we just have one word means do that, follow that plan, okay? But that's because I'm anal retentive, as you can tell, okay? Maybe that's why she married me. I don't know. It's got to be the only reason, right? Yeah. So resources. So one of the big things, again, that I want you to take away from tonight's class is, and these resources are in the handouts. And if you want to know something else, please come into the store, send us an email, okay? Ask us. We are here to help you, okay? All right. So disasters. We got natural disasters and man-made disasters. And if you stand here and look out into the world, right, we got different kinds of disasters. If something bad happens to me, okay. The local, like in my block, my state, my country. So we have different levels of effect, okay? And we can have different plans based on those. Yeah. So, Katrina, does anybody want to have to get evacuated to a FEMA shelter and live like that? Okay, where people died. There were hundreds of rapes. Okay, the only reason I bring up a rape, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, okay, is my wife was raped when she was 15 years old. Her mother was raped and almost murdered. Her grandmother was raped and almost, and has a steel plate still in her head, okay, because she had to have, it almost killed her. So I got a real bad, anyway. So don't put yourself in a situation where that's possible. Avoid those situations. And we all remember Mr. Brown, right? That just last year was out in his van, got stuck in the snow. It's a guy, okay? Doesn't get on the phone, doesn't dial 911. He says, I'll get out, I'll go for help. Gets out of the van, goes out into the blizzard. Next morning, he's still not back, 10 o'clock in the morning. His wife picks up the phone, calls 911, sheriff, direction, they find him. They get out there, they save the family. They look for him for months, and it's 6, 8, 9 months later that the search and rescue team finally found his body. Okay. Should have been ready for the storm. When you go out into that kind of weather, who's got a cold weather kit in their trunk? Okay, 2. Okay. Homework. Okay. So what happens? Okay, I used to make a drive. I was working in Vegas doing security work. And I would make the drive from Salt Lake, from Stansbury Park down there frequently. A couple times I would take my much better half. So one time where April and I are in the car, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because the snow has really slowed us down. We're just south of Beaver, and the snow is blowing so hard, you can't move. You can't go anywhere. Okay, so what do? You get off the interstate, you pull over off the side of the road as far as you can. Of course, I'm driving a white car. But in the trunk, we got blankets, snacks. We waited out the storm. The next morning, when they cleared the road, got in the car and went. And it was no problem, okay? But for other people, that's not the case. Okay, and that's the whole point of preparedness, isn't it? Okay, so what are some of the risks? So we got flash flooding. Yeah. And a couple more resources too, by the way. FEMA's got all kinds of good documents, right? So the church has got a template. If you go online and search for it, you can look for the family emergency plan. It's in the manual too. You can go to FEMA and pull down the family emergency plan. And within that document, it's a skeleton, if you will. You populate that thing, okay, with, do I have X, Y, and Z? In the event of this is what we're going to do. So let's just say, for example, the earthquake happened right now, okay? Does your spouse, if you're married, does your spouse know where you are? If you're not married, does your family know where you are? If you have kids, where are the kids? Who's watching the kids? How do the kids get picked up? It's so an emergency management plan. And there's a lot of good apps out there that could help you do a lot of this. So what are the risks? Okay, so some of the things, environmental, right? Those are the things out there in the world, whether it's a fire, flood, flash flood, earthquake, and then we got people doing naughty things, okay? And this guy's not getting in because that door's got door armor, okay? And I wouldn't keep talking about it except that it really is good stuff. In fact, I've installed it on a friend of mine's house and put it on her RV. Yeah, because RVs are notoriously easy to get into. Okay, so these are the top threats for Cedar City, okay? All right, and I know you can't read them, but these are in your slide. So earthquake, okay? You know, there's a fault line. We have a couple of fault lines here, but more specifically, when we talk about fault lines, Salt Lake is, there's 7 fault lines that can affect Salt Lake. And so the reason I talk about Salt Lake is because that's really the core of the state. And what I mean by that is 80% of the population of the state lives within the fault lines that are up there, okay? So that also means our economy. And so if something happens to Salt Lake, we will be affected, okay? That's the only reason I'm talking about them. So yes, we have a fault. You guys know that just, 2 weeks ago we had an earthquake over in Enoch, right? There was a 3.0 in Enoch, okay? Okay, there's another app, okay? Earthquake Watch, Quake Watch. You can put it on your phone, and in real time, if there's one, you'll get a notification. So the University of Utah, U of U, has got some great, they do a lot of really good seismic work. So they've got sensors all over the state. Flooding, and particularly flash flooding, you know, that's a significant risk for us because of our topography, because of the slope of the ground, the type of ground that it is, and yada, yada. So if you see water, you know, in a dry creek bed, whether it's this deep or this deep, just don't go in it, okay? Don't. All right? You know, we can go into hydrodynamics and we can talk about, you know, water this deep will take a car, water this deep will take a truck. Okay, bottom line is just don't go in it at all. Just back away from that water and just wait. You've got time. Find an alternate route, okay? Do not go into flood water, period. You guys see in the news just the other day, I mean like 2 days ago, the 2 babies that were swept away and then are gone? Yeah, I know, it's terrible. Fire. Urban fire is not such a big risk for us here. We've got really good fire department. We've got sufficient water to fight fires. And where I live, one of the things that we're applying to the house is there's a film that I could spray on the house and make the house fire-proof. Okay, it's $500. Okay, it's good for about 3 to 5 years, but anyway. Drought. You know, well, there's not a lot we can do about stopping a drought, but you know, water storage. You know, what do you guys have for water storage? Speaking of water storage, these bottles, we just got these in. What's cool about these things are really tough plastic. And I'm actually going to get a couple and put more of these in my trunk because the water bottles I have in my trunk, if I drop it, they'll break. Okay, this I can throw at him, and it's not going to break. Okay, the plastic, it's that tough. It's the water inside. It's got an antibacterial yada 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 in it. These are cool. Here, seriously, don't let it go. Yeah, I was trying to hit you, but I don't want it. But anyway, so you get the point. But water. Okay, so making sure you have enough. Hazardous weather, we do. We can get a tornado here. There's nothing to say we won't. We do get hail, right? We get all kinds of thunderstorms. One of my big concerns is hazmat. If you knew what went up and down what went up and down I-15 every day, you would be a lot more concerned. There's all kinds of nasty things that go up and down I-15. We also have nasty things that are on the rail lines too. And then anybody know about the explosion a little over 20 years ago now down in Henderson, Nevada? You know, PepCon? All right, tell me about PepCon.
Isn't it more than 20 years ago?
About 21, 22, something like that, yeah.
I was in high school
Down there. And what did they do to your high school?
They let us all go home and we just made our way home, but my little sister had a panic attack and was taken to a hospital, and my parents couldn't find her for half the day. They didn't know what hospital, the school didn't know where she was. Nobody could find her. It was scary.
Whew. So that whole emergency management, the whole emergency planning thing, yeah. So yeah, ideally she should have said, hey, you need to contact my parents, or so they didn't worry and they knew where to get her. But so PepCon, you know, it was a rocket fuel plant in Henderson, Nevada. Okay, they had a problem. It went boom, And when I said boom, I mean, it killed lots and lots of employees. It knocked cars off the interstate 6 miles away. Okay, so the state of Nevada says, oh, no, you can't have anything like that down here. We got people here. So they made them move it. That's right. That's what WECO. Yeah, that's right. Move it to Utah. Okay, so that's what we have northwest of us. Okay, it's the same plant. Okay, but where we are, typically the winds aren't blowing from there. They would go north of us. Let Beaver get the downwind from that, right? Okay, but hazmat, there's all kinds of hazardous materials, and some in and of them, by themselves, it's bad. But so let's say a truck full of chlorine spills, but then another truck comes along that's got sulfuric acid, and okay, so hazmat. That's another one of those. There's an app. Okay, go to the county website. There's an app that you can put on your phone, and if there's a hazmat spill, you can know about it. So at least, oh wait, I don't want to deal with the traffic. I'm going to get off at X, Y, and Z exit. And I'm going to go get some lunch. Air crash, we because Cedar, right? We have, because of the university and the aviation program, we got lots of student pilots. We got all kinds of stuff flying in and out of here on any given day, whether it's fixed wing, like wings, right? Planes, or helicopters. We got both. Pipelines, we got a couple of those, but none of the huge pipelines come through town. And then terrorism and unrest. Terrorism, the thing about terrorists is they want to be in the news, they want to scare people, so there really isn't a draw here. There's no reason for a terrorist group to come here and mess with us. So we're pretty low on.
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just looked it up. The Pepcon disaster was May 4th. In 1988, the year I graduated. So almost 30 years ago.
30? Wow, man. God. Doesn't it, though? Wow. Wow. That's a little creepy, though.
We can't believe that 30 years ago you graduated high school.
Yeah.
It could have been only one.
No, it was like 4 or 5. All right, so a couple other resources. Utah, be ready. And, again, FEMA, are you ready? So in your packet, we gave you a couple things so you could assess your readiness. But yeah, so Pepcon, though, that was the world's largest non-nuclear explosion when that thing went off. If that makes you feel any worse. Okay. So a couple of weeks ago at the monthly county emergency management meeting where lots and lots of folks go, Jody Johnson, he's the person from the hospital. He's the administrator at the hospital that talks about emergency management within the county. And I asked him specifically, what are the top risks to the hospital? Okay, because I want it to be available when I need it, because. All right, so this is their list. And so their list is a little bit different, their orders, their sequence is a little bit different. And you can look, and the reason I say this is you look at your zip code, look at your circumstances, because your risk could be a little bit different, okay? Like if you live in a brick home, it's going to be different than if you live in a stick-built home. So what is the likelihood of any one of these events? And then how bad or good is your block? Okay? We all know, right? Every ward has a preparedness person, right? And part of that is within that preparedness plan, we have block captains, okay? And whether you're LDS or not, everybody here in Cedar City is part of that. So if I have a next door neighbor that's Hindu, it doesn't make a difference if something bad happens, I take care of my family first, and I reach out to my neighbors, and that concentric circle gets bigger. And this is so that we help each other, so that the first responders, whether it's fire or medical, or they can deal with the real emergency, okay? So this is something that's worth knowing, though. So who here is part of that whole process? If you're not, you should be. And the church has a packet. So, for example, if something happens to your home, you have a colored placard that you put in the window. So green, I'm good, we're all good, there's no problem. Yellow, red, black. Black means there's a death in the family. So Do you guys know what I'm talking about? No?
They did this a lot of years ago, probably maybe 9 years ago, but it never took off.
Well, it depends on what stake you're in, okay? Because some stakes are more active, they're better at this process than others. But I guarantee you, if you ask the question, we can help, we can help our wards get better, okay? It's not just top down, it's bottom. We need to help the process too. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a member of CERT. And so there's another thing called Neighborhood Scout, okay? That can tell you bad things going on in your zip code. Okay, so this is an example of an EMP blast over Omaha. EMP, because the Koreans are talking about it. Yeah, don't worry about it, really. Okay, in the spectrum of things to worry about, what?
Yeah, I just read a book about it. It's horrifying.
Well, okay, so we can talk about it then. We'll talk about it. All right, because he and I were just talking about it. Because, yeah, okay, so can the North Koreans pull it off? Well, they could, but not with a missile that they have today. What they could do is take a ship or a barge or whatever. Submarines, they have really terrible submarines. Anyway, that's another story. So, but they could go to the coast and they could launch something. And why would they want to do it, over the center of the United States? Because air burst over the center is going to affect more area. Okay. But, and the scenario he and I were talking about is they get a device, they put it in a shipping container, and it's labeled bags of rice or rubber or used rebar or whatever it is. Okay, so they ship it to the United States. It gets to the port of Los Angeles. The guys say, yep, that's a container. Next. So it goes on a truck. So it gets over here, and they got a volunteer that's going to go rent a Cessna. He puts the device in the back of the Cessna. He gets it up to altitude and detonates it. Okay. But what are the odds of that happening? Yes, we have federal agencies that are looking at containers coming into the United States. And, so what are the odds? Pretty low, okay? But if you really think that that's a threat, well, then there are things you can do about it. You can have spare backup power in things, a Faraday bag, Faraday cage, okay? So if there's an EMP, it's protected, okay? And it's not just North Koreans that you got to worry about, okay? The Russians have that capability. China has the capability. And the sun has that capability, and the sun's done it to us lots of times, okay? All right. So tornadoes. If you look, tornado activity. We're not in the alley, so to speak, okay? But yes, tornadoes can occur anywhere. And this little box that's right here, this highlighted box, that's a national planning scenario. Okay, so if you were to talk to Washington D.C. and say, "What are you guys planning for?" Okay, there's a national plan, and these are the top threats in order that they use for planning and mitigation purposes. Okay, number one threat, they're worried about a nuclear device, and then it goes. You can see what the list is. So you can look at that list and keep that in mind when you're building your emergency management or emergency preparation kit. And then likelihood. What's the likelihood of any of these events? Well, let me tell you. Pandemic is a number one concern in Las Vegas, and that's because of all the international travelers. All those folks get there. Whatever they're doing, gambling, yanking on slot machines. So they're always monitoring it, making sure that disease doesn't get into the population. But that's their number one concern. Okay, so assess your risks. This is kind of a process, right? What other risks? Look, again, sit down with a piece of paper. What are the top 10, 15, 12, whatever number you want to use? What are those risks to you? And then, what are your assets? And then prioritize. What's most important? Now, down here at the bottom, we got a thing that says the rule of three. Okay, that means a couple of different things. The rule of three. It means I cannot survive longer than 3 minutes without air. Somebody else help me out with the rule of three. Tell me what they are. We should all know these. You be quiet.
3 days without water.
3 days without water, great. And 3 weeks without food. Okay, that's the rule of 3. The other part of this is 3. Because when I buy one at the store, 1 is not enough. Okay? It drives me nuts. Go to the store, we'll go grocery shopping, the wife will go up, grab a box of bars. Don't buy 1, buy 2. And if you're going to get 2, get 3. So here's why. You come home, you eat them. The box is empty. It goes in the trash. You put it on the list. So you open up the second box. You never run out of things, okay, if you follow the rule of 3. Plan ahead, okay. That's her and her bars. It's the one thing that drives me nuts. Maybe not the one thing, but. So, yeah, so there's some other links with some good resources. And then, ideally, I would ask you to practice this, especially if you have kids. Okay, there are ways to practice responding to an emergency where you don't scare the kids, you make it a game, okay? We have a thing we call Spin the Princess, where there's a spinner and there's all the names of the Disney princess movies, right? So at the end of one of our training exercises, we all sit down in the living room, talk about what we learned from it, and then play Spin the Princess. And if you get the right princess with the right, you get to reach into the box and pull out a prize. So, but we try to make it fun. And then if we're prepared, it doesn't matter what happens, right? And this is exactly what the church tells us. When I say the church, I mean the scriptures, I mean church leadership, I mean at the stake level. Heavenly Father says the same thing. So if we're ready, then we thrive no matter what happens out there. We are ready in our homes, okay? That's what we want to get to. All right, so I didn't bring it in here. I should have, but I have a thing called an everyday carry, okay? That's a thing that's with me all the time. My rule is within reach, okay? That's where it's supposed to be. So from living in California and lots of other places, literally, in California, when I lived out there, at my desk, under my desk, I had this thing. So if there was a quake, I reach and I grab it. If I can get outside with it, great. If I'm trapped in the building, I still have it, okay? So that's my everyday carry stuff, that's kind of essential. And then I have a get-home bag. And then, so depending on where you are, you should have your own get-home bag. Your kids ought to have a few things in their backpack. Like if they don't have their own cell phone, and almost every kid does these days, but if some means for them to communicate with you. When I was a kid, my mom had a quarter taped inside my wallet. Okay, so I had my wallet, but it was taped in there, so I can make a phone call. Now there's no, I haven't seen a payphone in years, but it tells you how old I am. Okay, so again, build this up and then practice, okay? So what skills do you need? And this is what we like to. So I have a set of skills. Josh has got a set of skills, and he's filling a void with us, and so it's really great to have him join us. So what are the skills that you need based on the risks? So what are the risks, the threats to your home, and then what skills do you need, okay, to reduce or mitigate those? And yeah, down here, this is one of my favorite things. I know you probably can't see it, but it's a whole bunch of white guys sitting around behind a sheet of plywood, and the plywood says, drunks. Yeah, drunks with guns. Drunks with guns. You loot, we shoot. Okay. Really, drunks with guns. Huh, yeah, that's reassuring. Okay, so, yeah. Anyway. Pandemic, we could talk about that. That's hours-long class. A friend of mine, Dr. Osterholm, he's the head of the Infectious Disease Prevention Center at the University of Minnesota. It's a program that's part of the CDC in Atlanta. And, there's all kind. Who's got a dust mask, right? In your everyday carry. In my everyday carry, I have a dust mask. It's thin enough that I can keep out a lot of things. Pollen, dust, and hopefully if somebody coughs on me, keeping that stuff out too. But so these are 2 links to some really good resources. Some more resources. So here's a question. You're going down the interstate and you come up to something like this. What are you going to do? Are you? You're going to cross? Are you? Okay. What if the next exit is 80 miles away to the next exit and there's no services in between and you got 1 gallon of gas? What are you going to do? Because I could talk about somebody that ran out of gas a couple weeks ago, but it wasn't him, but he knows what I'm talking about. But a friend of mine, anybody go down to Vegas? Ever heard of the Zombie Apocalypse store? Oh, okay. It's kind of a kitschy, weird, okay, little place. All right, so buddy of mine, Mike Munko, owns the thing. He was coming back from Comic-Con in San Diego, just crosses the state line. There's a car that has a problem, pulls over to the side of the road, starts a fire. The brush catches on fire. The brush blows all over the place. 20 cars end up burning up, okay? So he's sitting there in his truck, and he sits there. It's the heat. It's August, Vegas, okay? So it's only, 172 degrees. Got no food, no water, no, nothing. And this guy's, okay, so I love that story because, how ill prepared he was. It's just a good lesson. Okay. So I talked a little bit about triggers, thresholds. So if something bad happens, how much bad can you accept before you have to do something? And what I mean by that is if there's a little smoke in here, is that okay? Or if the alarm goes off, is that when we go outside? So determine what those thresholds are for a couple of different threat scenarios, okay? Where are you going to shelter? How are you going to get there? And then this is really important, is sharing that plan with your family members, right? And then talk to your other folks outside. And what I mean by that is, as I mentioned, if something bad happens, if there's a quake down here and something happens in Southern California or Vegas, potentially I might be going up to Salt Lake to go to my mother-in-law's. Or we might just pick her up and go somewhere take her with us. But it depends on what the scenario is. And then practice. Do practice, because it's only going to make you better. And then once you practice, then you'll be able to improve your plan. Okay. So again, assess your readiness. And so this is just a matrix, right? And are you ready for a flash flood? Are you? Do you know what to do? And are you equipped? And when I say, do you know what to do? So for example, if you're in town and there's a flash flood, well, can you grab your map or your phone and look and find an alternate route that's safe? Can you do that? So bugging in or bugging out, okay? This is, in the prepper community, this is one of those things that's a long discussion. Do I stay or do I go? All right, so I don't know. Have you thought about under what conditions you would abandon your home and all your material goods and leave? Have you? Have you? What if there's a 7.0 earthquake here? What if there's a 7.5 in St. George? Is it time to pack up and go somewhere else? Because, the interstates are going to be closed. Because life will be so hard along I-15 that this isn't a good place to be. So that might be, evacuation is another way to put it, okay? That's something to think about. And if you do, what stuff do you take? So 72-hour kit, right? Because I tell you, eating raw meat's a hard thing to do, okay? But I haven't been a soldier, yes, I've done that too. But anyway, so 72-hour kit. What's in your kit? You should have a 72-hour kit. The church tells us, right? Have a 72-hour kit. You really ought to have a couple because, essentially I have one of those in my trunk, one is in the wife's trunk, and then there's a couple in the garage based on the season. So if it's summer, I grab this one. If it's winter, I grab that one because this one's got, stuff, for my daughter for spring in the summer versus in the winter, okay? So here's a whole bunch of resources. And if you ever want to build your own safe room, by the way, FEMA's got a whole bunch of guidelines on how to do it. And it's not cheap to retrofit a home using FEMA standards. There are more inexpensive ways to do that. And then stockpile. So these are things that everybody ought to stockpile, in case of it, before disaster. It sounds like it is pretty common sense stuff too, by the way. Like an air pump. I mean, if you get a flat tire on your bicycle or your car, okay, because if your car dies, you got to ride your bike, right? Okay, but you want to be able to put air in your car. So this next set, and I know you can't read them from there, but this next set of lists are in your handout, and they're right out of the LDS Preparedness Manual too. So because I'm anal retentive, let me tell you what I have. Okay, so down there in St. George, we can survive pretty readily. We have everything we need for 3 months. At the ranch, I can live there for the foreseeable future when the lights go out. Okay, we have our own water. In fact, Bob was supposed to install a solar system out there today. So if I lose electrical power, yada yada. So we have our own well. We have short-term, long-term food. And when I say short-term and long-term, right? Short-term, that's stuff that I could eat right away, right? Versus we have cases and cases of these, of stuff at home, right? But you have to do something. You got to cook it, you got to mill it, you got to grind it, okay. But we also have years worth. So, and why? Because I have been in bad places, and I have seen people kill each other for a meal, okay? Okay. And I don't want to see that anymore. So, I would ask you to be prepared. So, in summary, there's two kinds of people in the world. There are those who are prepared, and they're victims. Okay, there are those who are ready, and then there are folks that come over and knock on your door and say, please give me. And then when it gets bad, they say, give me. And then it gets really bad, they have a firearm, and they say, I'm taking all your stuff. And, okay? So those are the kinds of things that can happen. And, again, I'm just asking you to be as prepared as you can be under your circumstances. I'm not telling you to spend beyond your means, not to go into debt, but to analyze what are the risks to you and your family and become prepared for those potential calamities.